disaster risk management in the country?
I think we need to critique ourselves as a country and look at us and say we are not able to cope.
How can the three spheres of government, together with the private sector and civil society, join hands in collaboration towards enhancing climate resilience?
Climate change and disaster management is everyone's business. It doesn't discriminate, doesn't care where you live. It literally is going to affect you in one way or the other. For us, we believe that by working together in a holistic manner.
Today, we discuss a matter of growing urgency: the role of municipalities in disaster risk reduction. Around the world, and in particular South Africa, municipalities are finding themselves on the front lines of multiple crises: floods, droughts, and infrastructure collapse. And the burden of response falls squarely on local government. Today, we dive into some of these challenges, but we also offer solutions. And joining the discussion is SALGA's Portfolio Head for Municipal Sustainability, Ms. Dorah Marema. Thank you for joining the discussion.
Thank you, Bonolo.
Great. And what are some of the biggest disaster risks facing municipalities in South Africa?
I think one of the biggest is the climate-induced risks. We have seen how the climate is really changing. There are very severe, very frequent climate-induced events like heavy rainfalls, torrential rains that result in flooding. So that is just one of the challenges that municipalities are facing, and because these events are very frequent, municipalities are not able to recover quite quickly from them, to be afforded the time to conduct recovery and rehabilitation and rebuild the infrastructure that would be damaged. And I think followed by that is the heat waves, is the wildfires that we have seen, all related to the changing climate and the warming climate, which we're really struggling with.
And with regard to municipalities mitigating the risks of these climate-induced disasters, what then are some of the challenges that local governments face in disaster risk management?
Look, I think the challenges that municipalities are facing stems from the inadequate disaster management system that we have in our country. We have a system which is not geared towards saving lives and towards reducing the likelihood of destruction of critical infrastructure. We have a system that, of course, purports the fact that we have to really focus on risk reduction. Our framework, disaster management framework, speaks a lot about risk reduction. However, we do not have a lot of capacity as well as funding that is geared towards risk reduction. Our funding that we have for disaster management is only after a disaster has happened. There is assumption that municipalities would generate revenue to be able to fund their own risk reduction efforts. And we have seen that that is a challenge, that is really not happening. If you can think of a rural municipality with very low revenue base and not able to generate adequate funding for them to cover just many priority issues around maybe housing, water, electricity, water and sanitation, disaster management, risk reduction comes last in a situation like that. And what we have been advocating as SALGA is a complete overhaul of our disaster management system that will then enable municipalities and empower them to focus more on risk reduction efforts, so that when a disaster comes, at least we would have mitigated the likelihood of that disaster happening. Because a disaster becomes a disaster because we're not able to handle the threat or the risk once it becomes a reality.
And what are some of the ways in which municipalities can better respond to disaster risks?
I think the most important thing is to conduct your risk and vulnerability assessments to understand which areas are more vulnerable or prone to risks and what kind of risk, and then be able to manage that by developing a disaster management plan that would then say, in terms of this risk, this is what we plan to be able to mitigate it, and should it happen, these are some of the measures, and have contingency measures. I think a lot of our municipalities do have disaster management plans. However, what we know is that the effectiveness of such plans is really based on funding or resources being made available to be able to undertake them. And at the moment, many of them are really are unfunded. So that is one area. The other area is integrating disaster risk reduction into the integrated development plans of municipalities. So looking in your various area sectors, let's say in human settlement, what are the risks and how are we going to be able to manage that risk? Looking in water and electricity infrastructure, what are the risks in our jurisdiction and how are we going to be able to manage that? And actually mainstreaming it throughout all the areas or the departments or the sectors within a municipality. And it's also really focusing a lot on developing community-based early warning systems. We know that the South African Weather Service is responsible for issuing the warnings. However, when the warnings then get into municipal space, how do we then distribute that? And making sure that the communities are better prepared. I always say that communities are better placed to save themselves when they know what to do. Right? It's not good enough to say that we have sent this through a WhatsApp and that maybe, some goodwill people will then forward it to the relevant people. We need to start moving, even as a country, there are many other innovative ways. There's cell broadcast that invades your cellular phone and start to broadcast the messages that invades your television and radio to communicate a message. Many countries are far ahead than us. And I think we need to start moving to that. But again, mobilizing community, raising awareness, people understanding their risks and what then needs to happen when there's a threat. How are we going to communicate it? And sometimes we think it can be complicated, but other times you can just even have a bell. When a bell rings, then people know that there is a threat, or maybe it's a whistle. Or whatever, and it doesn't have to rely on technology, complicated stuff, or even data, and to be able to communicate the message. But again, on the other end is when we're saying to people, pack your bags and leave because there is a tornado that is coming in your community. Where are they going to be able to go? Because I think a lot of people may get the message, but they may not be keen to leave because they are afraid that their belongings will be stolen. And then again, where do they go? If there are no safe houses or safe spaces for them to be able to go and know that we will be housed and then we can go back to our lives. So those are some of the areas that I think we really need strengthened. But like I say, it almost feels like to just say local government must do this within a national context that is not conducive for that is almost selling municipalities short.
And on that note, are there any examples of successful disaster risk reduction initiatives in South African municipalities?
Yes, at eThekwini Metro, a metro that has been battered by a number of disasters in the form of flooding, mudslides, and things like that. They actually have worked on an amazing intervention in an informal settlement called Quarry Road. I think it's it's probably ward number 3. I may be incorrect, but that community is settled on the floodplain of the Palmid River. And the metro, different departments within the metro, people dealing with stormwater, environmental management, people dealing with climate change, they came together to work with the community to literally, educate them about the challenges that may arise when it rains, because they are just situated on the floodplain. And together with the community, they came up with a community early warning system. So once they receive a warning that there's going to be heavy rains and that Palmid River might flood and there will be overflowing and affecting those settlements along its river banks, what are some of the warnings that will be sent and how will they'll be sent? So they work together with the ward councillors, with the community-based organizations and various groups to decide for themselves how the warnings will be issued, and then how will they then be able to activate the community-based disaster response teams to be able to assist. As a result of that intervention and that community-based early warning and response initiative, we have seen during the April 2022 floods that there was flooding in that river, but there was not a single soul that perished as a result of that. The community activated as per what they have agreed, and everyone then remained safe. And as a result, we've been looking at eThekwini to be able to share this best practice with other municipalities. It's the first of its kind. There is no other municipality in the country that has come up with this, and we as SALGA would like to be able to take that and see how we could be able to replicate it in other areas. There might be other ways of communicating that the community would prefer, the various communities and various municipalities could prefer. But we believe that is a transformative intervention that included working with people to value the river and the wetlands and to clean it up. They put litter traps, so when the water comes, it flows. It's not stuck because there's some waste that is trapping. So and it created jobs around recycling and cleaning up of the wetland and beneficiating from the wetland. So I'm saying it in very simplistic terms, but it's quite an integrated community awareness program that had to be implemented, and looking at and working with different departments within the municipality.
Mm-hmm. You spoke earlier about a complete overhaul of South Africa's disaster management framework. In that vein, what key actions can be taken to enhance disaster risk management in the country?
I think we need to critique ourselves as a country and look at us and say, we've got an amazing piece of legislation, the Disaster Management Act. We've got the framework. We've got various forums, from the National Disaster Management Center to provincial disaster management centers to the district disaster management centers, but we are not able to cope. I think the frequency of the climate-induced weather events have tested the efficacy and the robustness of our disaster management system. And what we are saying is that it will definitely lag a disaster response function. We need a very robust disaster response function that is separated from disaster risk reduction and that will be able to descend on a municipality in a rural province that does not have a disaster management center. But people still can be saved. So SALGA embarked on a benchmarking study tour. We went to other countries like Malawi and that were hit by cyclones. We went to Brazil, an economy similar to us, and they too have been working on overhauling their system. And we learned that there's a separation between disaster response and recovery to the work of disaster risk reduction. We believe that the disaster risk reduction function can be improved, but we have some kind of a function, or even structures that can manage that part. If they are given powers to enforce plans by all sector departments. Remember, disaster management is everybody's business. So all the sector departments, Department of Education needs to have its own plan in place with a budget. When a school is affected, they need to descend and be able to rebuild the school fast. But we need an agency or a function that will enforce that, to make sure that there is no state entity or department that will not have a disaster management plan with a budget allocated to it. And even when we we're putting up new developments that we are not going to build in the water courses, the wetlands, and we just believe that there has to be an authority with power that can enforce that. But on the other hand, we also need a separate function that would be able to assist us to respond to disasters. We can clear our stormwater drainages, we can have plans in place, but the magnitude of the disasters that we've been seeing, there's been rainfall that fell in 1 hour that we have not seen. That's been a rainfall for the entire year, and it falls in an hour. And we've seen this in the Western Cape. We've seen it in other provinces. And in a situation like that, no amount of stormwater drainage can contain a flood like that. That's just like, it's an act of God at the end. And in a situation like that, I think you can prepare, you can do whatever, but we know that when something like that happens, you won't be able to cope. And we need a disaster response function with capacity, not only in terms of humans, machines, boats, helicopters, temporary bridges, people who are not policymakers, who are actually people who will become boots on the ground, who will be able to descend in a municipality, save the people, make sure that we are able to quickly rebuild, that they are accessing the budgets from the various, if it's roads and transport, if it's water and sanitation, if it's dams, be able to rebuild, so that we don't end up with 3 years, people still don't have access to a road that was destroyed. So we are very bold in terms of already starting to think about like that. Obviously, we have to have a conversation as the entire country in terms of how can all of that look like, if we are to be able to institutionalize and make sure that we are able to save for our lives. For us, it is important that however the system is overhauled, it should be first priority it should be to save lives and to be able to reduce the reduction of the reduction of infrastructure that get destroyed, but again to be able to restore life back. People need to get back to work. Kids need to go to school. Our economy needs to start to work as fast as possible. So for us, we believe that that's what we are lacking and that's what we need.
Yeah. And briefly take us through some of the work that SALGA is doing to assist its member municipalities in enhancing their disaster risk reduction efforts.
Yeah, I mean, look, besides the huge task of lobbying for the overhaul, it's the actual working with municipalities to make sure that they've got up-to-date disaster management plans and contingency plans, and that these plans are actually also funded, and that they are municipal or disaster management functions with the qualified personnel in these centers that really know what they're doing, and that they are also integrating climate change into disaster management, because it is a phenomena which is here, which is, and we have to be ready. Our plans, if they were developed a couple of years ago and are not factored in climate change, then we are going to have a problem, because we are seeing quite a big shift, and the science is telling us that this is something that is going to be with us for quite a while. So we have to be prepared. On the other hand, we are pursuing internally, SALGA we're busy developing an internal policy to support municipalities during the time of disaster. So meaning we are working with them proactively to put all these plans and to make sure that they've got joint operation centers, that different departments will be activated when there is a warning that is coming, and that they are able to develop community early warning systems and to distribute the messages. But when a disaster hits, is a different story. So our policy is going to enable us to descend on a municipality upon receiving a warning. We will make sure that we are working with them from that point how are you distributing the messages? Do you have your jocks activated? Do you have stock of sandbags? What about the humanitarian aid? Is it stocked? Where is it placed? Have you identified safe houses, safe places where you will be able to evacuation centers where you will be able to evacuate the people? And when the disaster unfolds, because it doesn't unfold when it rains, it's over time, maybe after 24 hours or something, then the SALGA multi-sectoral, multi-cluster, multi-portfolio team will be able to descend in that municipality to work alongside the municipal disaster management officials to be able to respond, to literally take the menu or the manual or the toolkit and apply it. So we are hoping that will be one way of building capacity, assisting them to identify all of the safe houses, mark the roads that will be opened or closed, look at conducting assessments after the storm or the fire, whatever, identify the areas that needs to be, assess the amount of damage, and then assist them to be able to access the disaster grants by putting together business plans and apply for funding from the provincial disaster management center, or even do their own emergency procurement reallocation of the funding. And we're hoping that by doing that, by being hands-on and working with their municipality, that by the time we leave, they will be able to know
Yeah.
that if the next disaster happens, how do we activate internally, and how do we then get ourselves sorted to be able to access the help and the assistance that we need.
Yeah. With regard to issues of funding, SALGA is part of the ECHO DRR project, which recently received a 700 million rand shot in the arm. Briefly tell us about this, and how will this enhance disaster risk preparedness in South African municipalities?
Yeah, this is a landmark project. SALGA partnered with the lead organization, South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI, who is an accredited body in the country, accredited to access the Green Climate Fund, a funding mechanism under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, under the Paris Agreement. It's a first of its kind, and we are excited that SALGA is one of the implementing entities. It has got 3 outcomes. SALGA will be responsible for the outcome 2, which will be to work with the subnational governments, particularly municipalities and provincial governments, to be able to build resilience within municipalities, focusing on utilizing ecosystems. We spoke about wetlands and rivers and ecosystems. Look at them as an asset that will then assist us to reduce the impacts around fires, floods, and droughts. So those 3. So that's what we are doing. We're going to be piloting this with the aim of rolling it out. I think bringing SALGA into the fold as an association of 257 municipalities, it brings a multiplier effect into the project that could have been limited to 4 districts. And now we will be able to take some of the lessons and the trainings and the capacity building and the best practices that to be learned to be able to be rolled out into various municipalities. It brings in additional capacity within the disaster management and the climate change units of SALGA, but also brings capacity into the municipalities themselves, where we will have focal points that are going to be working with municipalities to identify the risk, as I said, around droughts, floods, and fires, and then identify some of the interventions that could be made, both in terms of training, but also actual infrastructure, as I said, ecological infrastructure in this case. So we are very excited. It's an 8-year project, which we believe, being the first of its kind, it will be able to position SALGA to be able to access further resources, to be able to roll out into the rest of the local government.
And as a final note, how can the 3 spheres of government, together with the private sector and civil society, join hands in collaboration towards enhancing climate resilience within our society?
Like I said, I think climate change and disaster management is everyone's business. It doesn't discriminate, doesn't care where you live. It literally is going to affect you in one way or the other. And for us, we believe that by working together in a holistic manner, as one society, because the changes that are needed at a big scale. We have to build resiliency fast. So on a huge scale, at a rapid speed, and that cannot be done by one sphere of government or even one sector. So we need what we call multi-level. So meaning all the levels of government and multi-sectoral, all sectors of society, to be able to come together, to put our heads together to ensure that we build resilience. It requires not only government, it also requires private sector and businesses, which are also badly affected. If we think about the 2022 floods in KZN and some of the companies that were affected there, if we think about the impact of this on the insurance industry, they are seeing damages and claims at a scale that they've not been seen before. And all of us then, we need to pause and say, we need to first understand the risk that we are facing, but also pull resources together to build disaster resilience, reduce the likelihood of a disaster happening if we can, and be proactive in terms of identifying the risk, putting plans together to be able to reduce the risk, and make and also make measures for us to be able to respond should a risk definitely occur. And I think there is no one, as I said, that is not going to be impacted. I think from national government to the local government level, through to civil society, communities are really the ones that are bearing the brunt of it. And I think we have to all work together to make sure that we can be able to not only build resilience, but to thrive in spite of the big challenge of climate change that we are facing.
Ms. Marema, once again, thank you for joining the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Floods, fires, and droughts are occurrences for which municipalities must be prepared for. And this episode has delved into these challenges and some of the opportunities that lie ahead. See you on the next episode.